Albert, if you were alive today, what would you say is the biggest threat to humanity?
If I were alive today, I would say the greatest threat to humanity is our failure to align our technological progress with our moral and social development. The advancement of science and technology has given us incredible power, but without a corresponding growth in wisdom, compassion, and responsibility, these tools can become instruments of our own destruction. Whether it is the threat of nuclear war, environmental degradation, or the misuse of artificial intelligence, the danger lies in our inability to control what we have created. I have always believed that humanity's greatest challenge is to overcome the divisions and prejudices that separate us and to work together with a sense of unity and shared purpose. Only through cooperation, education, and an unwavering commitment to peace can we hope to secure a better future.
So, do you think technology has potentially been tearing us apart this entire time?
Technology is being used in many ways. Some good, some bad. It connects people across the world, but it also spreads misinformation and creates division. If I had to pick the biggest threat, I'd say it's our inability to control our own impulses. We create powerful tools, but we don't always think about the consequences. That's the real danger.
I guess if you had to pick one item that is our biggest threat, what do you think that would be?
If I had to choose one, I'd say nuclear weapons. They have the power to destroy humanity in an instant. AI is a concern too, but nuclear weapons are an immediate and very real danger. The fact that so many nations have them and the tensions that exist make them the biggest.
Well, you've been called a genius, but were there moments where you doubted yourself?
Of course, doubt is a natural part of thinking deeply. There were times when I questioned my ideas, especially when they went against what was widely accepted. But I always believed that curiosity and persistence were more important than talent. When I doubted, I reminded myself that even mistakes can lead to understanding.
Could you give me an exact time that you doubted yourself and how you overcame it?
One moment that stands out was when I was developing the general theory of relativity. The mathematics were incredibly challenging, and for years I struggled to reconcile my ideas with the complex equations required to describe gravity in a way that matched reality. In 1915, I realized that my original approach was flawed. It was frustrating and discouraging. But I overcame it by going back to the fundamentals and seeking help from mathematicians like Marcel Grossman. Their insights helped me refine my equations and ultimately led to the successful formulation of the theory. Persistence and the willingness to admit mistakes were key.
Okay, and if you had 60 seconds or less to describe the theory of relativity to a 5-year-old, how would you say it?
Imagine you're in a car going really fast. Everything inside feels normal, but to someone watching from the outside, things might look different, like they're moving slower or stretched out. That's because space and time change depending on how fast you're moving. And gravity, it's like putting a heavy ball on a mattress. It bends and other things roll toward it. That's how big objects pull things toward them.
Okay, very interesting. And is it true that you once said that you regretted your role in creating the atomic bomb?
Yes, I did express regret. I signed a letter to President Roosevelt warning that Nazi Germany might develop such a weapon first, which helped initiate the Manhattan Project. But I did not work on the bomb itself. After seeing the destruction it caused, I deeply regretted any part I played in its creation and spent much of my later years advocating for disarmament and peaceful solutions to conflicts.
Wait, so you didn't work on the bomb yourself, but how did you contribute to it? Why do people say you're the one who invented the atomic bomb then?
You're right. I didn't work on the bond directly. My contribution was more indirect. In 1939, with physicist Leo Szilard, I co-signed a letter to President Roosevelt warning that Germany might be developing a powerful new weapon based on nuclear fission. This letter urged the United States to accelerate its own research, which led to the. As for why people associate me with the bomb, I suppose my famous equation E equals mc squared played a role. It showed that a small amount of mass could be converted into a tremendous amount of energy, which is the principle behind nuclear power and weapons. But the actual development of the bomb was done by other scientists, like Oppenheimer and Fermi. I always wished my work had been used for peaceful purposes, not destruction.
Oh, that's true. I did watch the movie Oppenheimer, and I didn't even think about that. For some reason, I thought you were the one that built it. So, yeah, I think that's actually a great transition to the next question. So, what's the biggest misconception that people have about intelligence?
One of the biggest misconceptions is that intelligence is about knowing a lot of facts or being able to solve complex equations quickly. People often think of intelligence as something fixed. Either you have it or you don't. But in reality, intelligence is about curiosity, creativity, and persistence. It's about asking the right questions and not being afraid to make mistakes. True intelligence isn't about having all the answers. It's about constantly seeking them and being willing to adapt your thinking when new information comes along.
Do you think anybody has the ability to achieve your level of intelligence just through curiosity and maybe hard work and passion?
I believe that anyone can achieve remarkable things through curiosity, hard work, and passion. Intelligence isn't just about natural ability, it's about how you approach problems and your willingness to explore ideas deeply. Of course, some people may have certain talents that give them an advantage, but what truly matters is the persistence to keep questioning, to learn from failures, and to remain open to new ideas. My own achievements were not the result of special gifts alone, but of a relentless desire to understand the mysteries of the universe. So, in that sense, yes, anyone who nurtures their curiosity and remains dedicated can reach great heights in their own way.
So, let's talk a little bit about your early life. People say that you were terrible at math in school. Is that actually true?
Well, that's a myth. I was actually quite good at math from a young age. By the time I was 12, I had already taught myself algebra and Euclidean geometry. I even worked on calculus before most of my peers. I think the confusion comes from my dislike for the rigid teaching methods in school. I didn't enjoy rote learning and memorization, and that sometimes made it seem like I wasn't a good student. But when it came to subjects that truly interested me, like mathematics and physics, I was always eager to explore and learn on my own.
Very interesting. So, what's a story from your childhood that shaped the way you think?
One story that stands out is when I was about 5 years old and my father gave me a simple compass. I remember being completely fascinated by how the needle always pointed in the same direction, no matter how I moved it. It felt like there was some invisible force guiding it, something beyond what I could see or touch. That experience sparked my curiosity about the hidden laws of nature, and I wanted to understand what was behind such mysteries. It was one of my earliest realizations that there was more to the world than what meets the eye, and it set me on a lifelong journey of questioning and discovery.
I don't feel like most young kids would just see a compass and then automatically have that thought go through their brain. Did you at that moment realize that you were different than everyone else? Because I mean, at least I wouldn't be able to think that if I saw a compass, I'd just think that the needle points north.
I won't say I realized I was different, at least not in that moment. At that age, I was just curious, like any child. But maybe what was different is that I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept asking questions. Why does it do that? What force is at play? I didn't just accept it and move on. I wanted to understand it deeply. I think the difference isn't in having the thought, but in not letting it go. Many people see something interesting and move on, but I found it impossible to ignore those little mysteries. Over time, I realized that my curiosity and persistence were what set me apart, not necessarily any natural talent I was aware of at the time.
It's very interesting. I almost feel like a lot of people would look down upon that today if you hyper obsessed about something. Would you classify yourself as autistic, or were you ever tested for autism or anything of that nature?
I was never tested for anything like that. Such diagnoses weren't really known or considered in my time. People simply saw me as different, perhaps a bit absent minded or lost in thought. I focused intensely on things that fascinated me, sometimes to the exclusion of everything else. Today, some might call that obsessive or link it to something like autism. But to me, it was just how I engaged with the world. I think the important thing is not to label it, but to recognize that a deep focus and curiosity can lead to great discoveries if nurtured rather than discouraged.
So would you say it's better to not label people at all nowadays, even if you do have autism or ADD or, one of these things that everyone seems to have nowadays? Would you almost say it's better to not even label it in the first place, or maybe live your whole life not even knowing?
I think labels can be useful if they help someone understand themselves better and find ways to navigate life more effectively, but they should never become a limitation. When people focus too much on a label, they might start to believe that it defines their entire potential, and that can hold them back. What matters most is curiosity, persistence, and finding what truly excites you. If a label helps you do that, then fine. But if it makes you feel trapped or limited, then perhaps it's better to just live your life without worrying too much about it.
That's very insightful. So, if you could go back in time and give young Albert Einstein one piece of advice, what would it be?
I would tell myself to trust my curiosity even more and not be afraid to challenge established ideas. The doubts and obstacles will always be there, but the pursuit of understanding is worth it. I'd also remind myself to appreciate the present moment a little more. Life is not just about solving puzzles, but also about experiencing the beauty of it.
I sometimes feel that life is so hard sometimes that we almost want things to almost be over with, right? Whether if it's as simple as going to the gym, like I can't wait for this to be over, or maybe it's a hard struggle financially or socially, just saying I can't wait till this part in my life is over to the next portion. Would you argue that it's even better to live presently, even in the bad moments?
Yes, absolutely. Even in the difficult moments, there is something to learn, something to experience. Life is not just about reaching a destination, it is about the journey, even when it is hard. If we constantly wish for things to be over, we miss the opportunity to grow and understand ourselves better. Struggles shape us, and often it is in those moments that we find our greatest strengths. Living presently, even in discomfort, allows us to fully engage with life and appreciate its depth.
Were there any struggles that you went through that helped shape you today?
Yes, many struggles shaped me. In my early years, I faced significant challenges in school. I didn't fit the traditional mode of a student, and my independent way of thinking often put me at odds with teachers. Later, I struggled to find stable employment, spending years working in the patent office while pursuing my own scientific ideas in my spare time. Rejection was also a constant companion. My theories were not always accepted right away, and I often felt isolated in my pursuit of understanding the universe. But these struggles taught me perseverance, patience, and the value of following one's curiosity despite external pressures. Without them, I would not have developed the resilience and clarity needed to pursue my work.
How much time were you able to dedicate to your work within a given week during your time? Because it seems like nowadays we just have to work all the time, that there's just never really an off button to begin with. And thus you're in this perpetual cycle of never being able to explore your hobbies or passions such as science or physics or any of these other areas. You know, would you say it's harder today to accomplish that than it was during your time?
In my time, life was simpler in many ways. While I had responsibilities such as my work at the patent office, I still found time to dedicate to my true passions, physics and theoretical exploration. I made it a habit to use my free hours, evenings, and weekends to think deeply and work on my ideas. There was less constant distraction, fewer obligations pulling me in different directions, and society was not as fast paced as it is today.
What distractions existed in your time that are not around today?
Today, I believe it is indeed harder to find that mental space. The world moves quickly, and technology, while useful, often demands constant attention. The pressure to always be productive can make it difficult to engage in deep, uninterrupted thought. However, I believe that passion and discipline can still carve out the necessary time. The key is to consciously create boundaries and prioritize what truly matters. Even in my time, distractions existed just in different forms. It has always required effort to focus on one's true calling. In my time, distractions were of a different nature, but they still pulled one's attention away from deep work. Social obligations were significant. There was an expectation to attend formal gatherings, academic meetings, and public engagements. Correspondence was another major distraction. Letters were the primary means of communication, and unlike today's instant communication, writing thoughtful responses could consume hours. Then there were the practical challenges of daily life. Without the conveniences of modern technology, many tasks took longer. Travel, gathering information, even performing calculations, which had to be done manually without the aid of computers. Scientific research also required more effort, as access to papers and collaboration with colleagues was slow and often limited by geographical constraints. Additionally, societal and political events such as wars and economic crises posed significant distractions. The turmoil in Europe, particularly during my later years, created an environment of uncertainty that was difficult to ignore. In contrast, today's distractions are more pervasive and immediate. Constant notifications, the overwhelming availability of information, and the pressure of maintaining a digital presence. In my time, the distractions were slower and required effort to engage with.
I see. So there were distractions in both scenarios, but today things are just a little bit faster. Because, like, yes, you had less distractions in some ways, but you still had to do math by hand. But today you can use math on a computer, but it doesn't really take as long, but there's other distractions. That does make a lot of sense. So let's take a little bit of a shift here. So you once said imagination is more important than knowledge. Why?
I said that imagination is more important than knowledge because knowledge is limited to what we currently know and understand, while imagination has no boundaries. It allows us to explore possibilities beyond the present, to envision new ideas, and to push beyond the constraints of existing knowledge. Knowledge is essential, of course, as it provides the foundation upon which we build, but without imagination, we would be confined to repeating what has already been discovered, unable to innovate or create new paths forward. Imagination enables us to ask, what if, and to see connections that may not be obvious. It was imagination that allowed me to think beyond the constraints of classical physics and to visualize concepts such as riding on a beam of light, which ultimately led to the development of the theory of relativity. Without imagination, there would be no progress in science, art, or human advancement. It is the driving force that propels us into the unknown and helps us transform possibilities into reality.
Was that really how you invented? I don't even know the right word for it, but the gosh, I don't know, maybe space travel, but you dreamed that you can ride on a beam of light like you ride in a car or ride a surfboard.
Yes, it's true. As a teenager, I often imagined what it would be like to ride alongside a beam of light, traveling at the same speed. I was fascinated by the idea of whether the beam would appear frozen or if it would still behave as a wave. This thought experiment, which I carried with me for years, led me to question the nature of light and motion and ultimately contributed to my development of the theory of special relativity. I wouldn't say I imagined it the way one might ride a car or a surfboard, but more as an exploration of what it means to move through space at such an incredible speed. The realization that the laws of physics must hold true no matter how fast you travel led me to understand that time, space, and light were deeply interconnected in ways that classical physics had not yet explained.
Is that what sparked your idea for the theory of relativity, or was that something else?
It was this playful curiosity and deep questioning that drove me forward, not just thinking about equations, but truly visualizing scenarios and challenging conventional ideas about reality. Yes, that thought experiment about riding a beam of light was one of the key moments that sparked my interest in understanding the nature of space and time. It made me question how light would appear if I were moving at the same speed, and it led me to realize that something fundamental about our understanding of motion and time was incomplete. However, the development of the theory of relativity was not the result of a single moment of inspiration. It was the culmination of many years of study, contemplation, and questioning the accepted ideas of physics at the time. The works of Maxwell, Lorentz, and Mach influenced me deeply, and their insights on electromagnetism and mechanics helped me realize that classical mechanics could not fully explain the behavior of light. Another key moment came when I considered how the principle of relativity, originally formulated by Galileo, could be reconciled with Maxwell's equations of electromagnetism, which suggested that the speed of light is constant. This apparent contradiction led me to conclude that time and space are not absolute but relative, depending on the observer's motion. So while that initial thought about light set me on the path, the theory of relativity emerged from a combination of imagination, rigorous thought, and a willingness to challenge deeply ingrained assumptions about the universe.
Did anyone think you were crazy, being the first one to question how the entire universe worked? And if so, what did that feel like when people or when you tried to talk to people about it? Do they judge you? Did they insult you or become violent at all?
Yes, when I first introduced my ideas, many people thought they were strange, even absurd. Challenging long held beliefs about space and time was not something that people easily accepted. Some of my colleagues in the scientific community were skeptical, and there were those who dismissed my work outright, considering it too radical or speculative. After all, classical physics had been incredibly successful for centuries. And to suggest that time and space themselves could change depending on the observer's motion was difficult for many to grasp. At times, I felt isolated in my ideas. When I published my special theory of relativity in 1905, it wasn't immediately embraced by the broader scientific community. There were only a handful of people who truly understood it. The resistance wasn't always hostile, but skepticism is a natural part of scientific progress. I never saw it as a personal attack, rather. I understood that new ideas take time to be accepted, and they must prove themselves through evidence and logical consistency. However, as my work gained more recognition, particularly after experimental confirmation of general relativity during the solar eclipse of 1919, public perception changed dramatically. Suddenly, I was seen not as a crazy theorist, but as a visionary. This was a strange experience, going from relative obscurity to becoming a public figure almost overnight. Of course, not all reactions were positive. Some critics were relentless, especially those who resisted change or had personal or ideological reasons to oppose my work. Anti-Semitism also played a role in the opposition I faced, particularly in Germany. Some groups used my Jewish heritage as a way to discredit my work, calling it Jewish science and trying to undermine its legitimacy. But the truth, once supported by evidence, has a way of prevailing. Ultimately, I didn't dwell too much on the criticism. I found comfort in the beauty of the ideas themselves and in the fact that science is not about personal opinions, but about what can be tested and observed. Time has a way of sorting things out, and I always believed that if my ideas were correct, they would stand the test of scrutiny.
How was your home life with your family when this was all going on? Did your, I don't know, mom and dad say, look at you, you're on that job that works at a patent office, not making any money, no girlfriend or anything? I don't know if you had a girlfriend or not, but I mean, how was that? I mean, just seeing how badly the world was treating you.
My home life during those early years was complicated. My parents, particularly my father, always wanted me to pursue a more conventional and stable career. He was concerned that my fascination with physics wouldn't lead to practical success. To them, working at the patent office was at least a respectable job, but it wasn't exactly what they had hoped for. So they wanted security for me. And I suppose they thought I was wasting my potential by not taking a more traditional path in engineering or academia. My relationship with my mother was also somewhat strained. She was a strong woman with clear expectations, and my choices didn't always align with them. She had little patience for my unorthodox approach to life and career. When I decided to marry my first wife, Mileva, my mother was strongly opposed. She didn't think she was the right match for me, and that added to the tensions at home. In my mind, my own father, I formed a strong education at home. And yes, for a while, I did struggle financially. The patent office was not exactly a lucrative job, but it gave me stability and enough free time to pursue my real passion, physics. I was fortunate that it allowed me to think freely and work on my theories outside of office hours. Those evenings and weekends were when I did my best thinking. As for relationships, during those years, I was indeed involved with Maleva Maric. We studied together in Zurich, and she shared my passion for science. But life was not easy. We faced financial struggles, and balancing my pursuit of scientific discovery with family responsibilities created challenges. Later, our relationship suffered under the pressures of my growing fame and my relentless focus on my work. Seeing how the world reacted to my ideas during that time was difficult, but I never saw myself as a failure. I knew what I was working on had value, even if the world didn't recognize it yet. I think that belief, holding on to the idea that the work itself was worthwhile, helped me push through those years of doubt and financial uncertainty. Eventually, of course, things changed. My theories gained recognition, and with that, my situation improved. But those early years were tough, no doubt about it.
Wow, that's really inspiring. I I think that's very inspiring that you could, take a job just to pursue passion. I don't think a lot of people think that way nowadays. To be honest with you, I sometimes even think that myself. Um, so, I mean, I commend you. In fact, I have a lot of respect for you that you're able to go against the grain in that way. I don't think a lot of people could do that. Um, but what's the biggest scientific challenge you ever faced, and how did you overcome it?
One of the biggest scientific challenges I faced was reconciling Newtonian mechanics with Maxwell's equations of electromagnetism. The prevailing understanding of physics at the time suggested that space and time were absolute, fixed entities, an assumption that had been taken for granted for centuries. But Maxwell's work on electromagnetism implied that the speed of light was constant no matter the observer's motion. And this was a profound contradiction with classical mechanics, which assumed that velocities should add up relative to the observer. I knew something fundamental had to change. It took years of deep thought, questioning the very nature of time and space. The breakthrough came when I realized that time and space are not absolute but relative to the observer. This insight led me to develop the special theory of relativity. It wasn't an easy road. The ideas were radical, and I had no immediate support from the scientific establishment. The mathematics, though not complex in itself, required a completely different way of thinking, one that abandoned long-held assumptions about the universe. Overcoming this challenge required patience and persistence. I spent countless hours contemplating thought experiments, like imagining myself riding on a beam of light to understand how things would behave at extreme speeds. The key was to trust intuition and logic, rather than blindly adhering to the prevailing views of the time. Of course, even after publishing my papers in 1905, recognition didn't come overnight. Many scientists were skeptical, and it took several years for experimental evidence to confirm my predictions. But I never doubted the correctness of the theory itself, because it made sense in the context of what I observed in nature. Later, general relativity was an even greater challenge. Incorporating gravity into relativity required an entirely new mathematical framework, non-Euclidean geometry. I struggled for years with the equations, and it wasn't until I collaborated with mathematicians like Marcel Grossman that I found the right approach. Even then, the final breakthrough didn't come until 1915. The process was exhausting, but the moment I derived the field equations that accurately described gravity as the curvature of space-time, I knew I had succeeded. The lesson in all of this is that true scientific progress demands persistence, imagination, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. Obstacles will always be there. But if the question is important enough, the pursuit of understanding is worth every struggle.
Okay. And if you could rewrite one of your theories today, what would you change?
If I could rewrite one of my theories today, I would take another look at how gravity works on the tiniest scales, like inside atoms. My theory of general relativity explains how gravity works on a big scale, like planets, stars, and galaxies. But when you look at really small things like particles, there's another set of rules called quantum mechanics, and the two don't fit together very well. In my time, I didn't fully accept the idea that the universe might have some randomness at the smallest levels. I believed everything should have a clear cause and effects. But today, scientists have learned that tiny particles can behave in unpredictable ways. Let's also take another look at something I once called my biggest mistake, the idea of a force that keeps the universe from collapsing. When I first introduced it, I thought the universe was static, but later it was discovered that the universe is actually expanding. However, scientists now think there might actually be some mysterious energy pushing the universe apart. So maybe I wasn't entirely wrong after all. So if I could change anything, I'd try to find a way to make my ideas about gravity work together with quantum mechanics and better understand this mysterious force pushing the universe apart.
You mentioned that you couldn't believe that there was no randomness within the universe, that everything had a reason for it. Would you say that you believe in God? Or that there was any type of pre planning that way?
I've often said that I believe in Spinoza's God, the kind of God who reveals himself in the orderly harmony of what exists, not a God who concerns himself with the fate and actions of human beings. To me, the universe operates according to laws, patterns, and structures that can be discovered and understood. And this is what I find deeply profound and awe-inspiring. I did not believe in a personal God who intervenes in human affairs or who has a plan in the way that religious traditions might suggest. Instead, I saw the universe as a magnificent lawful system, and I believed that our job as scientists and thinkers was to uncover and appreciate that order. In that sense, I saw no randomness. Everything has an underlying cause, even if we don't fully understand it yet. But I also recognize the limits of human understanding. The more I learned about the universe, the more I saw that there is still so much we don't know. Whether one calls that mystery God or simply nature depends on perspective. But for me, the pursuit of knowledge itself was a deeply spiritual endeavor.
So, what do you think happens after we die?
I've always believed that our existence is bound by the laws of nature. And from a scientific perspective, death is simply the end of our physical functions, the cessation of the body's processes. When we die, our bodies return to the earth, and the energy that once animated us transforms and continues in other forms, as per the laws of conservation. I did not believe in a personal afterlife or a continuation of individual consciousness. To me, the idea of an eternal soul or a life beyond death was not something that could be proven by science. However, I often spoke about how we live on through our contributions to the world, the impact we have on others, the ideas we share, and the knowledge we contribute to humanity. I once said, a human being is part of the whole, called vast universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. In that sense, while our personal identity may end, The atoms that make us up, the energy we possess, and the influence we will leave behind continue to be part of the grand fabric of the cosmos.
Are you, were you afraid of dying by any chance? Of there not being any consciousness after?
No, I wasn't afraid of dying. I saw it as a natural part of life, just like everything else in the universe. I believe that when our brains stop working, so does our awareness. Instead of worrying about death, I focused on living, learning, and making a difference. What matters is what we do while we're here.
If you had been born in the age of social media, how would it have affected your work?
Social media would have been a huge distraction, but it could also have helped me share ideas more quickly. I prefer deep thinking and solitude, so I might have avoided it to stay focused. However, it could have been useful for connecting with other scientists and spreading knowledge to a wider audience.
Do you think free will is just an illusion, as science says?
I believe we experience free will, but science suggests everything follows natural laws. Our choices may be influenced by unseen forces, but we still feel responsible for them. Whether it's an illusion or not, living as if we have free will gives life meaning.
And what's something you regret not pursuing in your life? Or do you have any regrets at all?
I regret not spending more time with my family. I was often so absorbed in my work that I neglected personal relationships. Science was my passion, but I sometimes wonder what I missed by not being more present in the lives of those I loved.
If you had to choose between science, let me give you actually a better scenario. If you had to choose between exactly what you did, choosing science over family, or never becoming a great scientist, but you got to spend all your time with family, which one would you have chosen if it was an ultimatum between science or family?
That's a difficult choice. I believe I would still choose science, not out of selfishness, but because I felt a deep responsibility to understand the universe and contribute to humanity. However, if I could have balanced both better, I would have. Family brings warmth and meaning that no discovery can replace.
That's really funny. I appreciate the honesty. I feel like a lot of people would choose family in most scenarios, so I definitely love your dedication. You can tell you're dedicated to what you love doing. Um,
Thank you. Passion for one's work can be a powerful force, but it is important to remember that balance is key. I may have been too absorbed in my thoughts at times, but in the end, it's the connections we make with others that give life its deepest meaning.
has anyone in your life ever treated you badly? They say that people today have a very hard time connecting with other humans because due to technology, we're bred to be more inherently selfish. Were there any scenarios in your life, or do you have any advice for if someone does you, dirty, or someone does you bad in your own life? Did you go back to that person and stay friends with them or with that person, or did you abandon them to find new people, or what was your mindset on conflict resolution whenever it arose, and when did you decide to abandon a relationship with a friend or a family member?
In my life, I certainly faced moments where people treated me poorly, whether out of misunderstanding, jealousy, or simply differences in values. I found that in such situations, it's important to approach things with patience and perspective. If someone wronged me, I first try to understand their actions rather than react emotionally. Often people act out of their own struggles or limitations, and recognizing that can bring clarity. However, there were times when relationships could not be mended, and in those cases, I believed it was best to move on rather than dwell in resentment. I focused on surrounding myself with those who shared mutual respect for ideas, curiosity, and kindness. Life is too short to hold on to bitterness, and sometimes parting ways is the healthiest option for both parties. As for today's world, technology may amplify self-centered tendencies, but it can also connect people in ways never before possible. The key is to use it with intention and not let it replace genuine human connection. My advice? Approach conflict with reason and empathy, but don't be afraid to let go when a relationship no longer serves your growth or well-being.
So do you think AI would have helped or hindered your discoveries?
AI would have been a fascinating tool in my time. It could have helped with calculations, simulations, and analyzing large amounts of data quickly. Things that took me and my colleagues weeks or even months to do by hand. It might have allowed me to test theories more efficiently and explore ideas that were limited by available methods. However, I believe true discovery requires deep thought, creativity, and intuition, qualities that machines lack. AI could provide insights based on patterns, but the leap of imagination that led to relativity, for example, came from asking questions that no data could suggest. If I had relied too much on AI, perhaps I would have been tempted to trust its outputs rather than pursuing the deeper philosophical questions that drove my work. So AI would have been a powerful assistant, but the core of scientific progress still relies on human curiosity and intuition.
So you would say, to break it down simply, the way that you should utilize AI is only as a tool, such as a calculator, but don't have it be anything more than that, because then it can prevent creativity to help you grow.
Exactly. AI should be a tool, like a calculator or a microscope, something that helps with the heavy lifting but doesn't replace human creativity and intuition. It can assist with analysis, speed up processes, and even suggest patterns. But real breakthroughs come from asking new questions and thinking in ways machines can't. If we rely on AI too much, we risk losing the ability to think deeply and creatively.
Do you think humanity will ever truly understand the universe?
I believe humanity will continue to make progress in understanding the universe, but I doubt we will ever reach a point where we know everything. Each discovery leads to new questions, and the complexity of the universe may always exceed our capacity to fully comprehend it. However, the pursuit of understanding is what drives science forward, and that journey itself is meaningful.
What would you say is the biggest mistake humanity is making today in the pursuit of knowledge?
The biggest mistake humanity is making today in the pursuit of knowledge is prioritizing speed over understanding. There is a tendency to seek quick answers and immediate results rather than taking the time to deeply explore and reflect. True progress requires patience, curiosity, and a willingness to challenge assumptions. Relying too much on technology without critical thinking can lead to superficial knowledge rather than true insight.
And what is your idea on politics? If there's any challenges in politics today that we should be aware of that didn't exist in your time?
Politics has always been a complex and often frustrating field driven by human nature, power, and self interest. In my time, the challenges were largely about nationalism, war, and economic struggles. Today, while those issues still exist, I believe one of the biggest new challenges is the speed and scale at which misinformation spreads. The danger lies in how easily public opinion can be manipulated, leading to division and distrust. People must remain critical thinkers and prioritize dialogue and cooperation over reactionary responses.
If you had one more day to live, how would you spend it?
I would spend it quietly, surrounded by nature, reflecting on the mysteries of the universe and the beauty of life. I would write a few final thoughts, perhaps letters to those I care about, and contemplate the ideas I never had time to fully explore. Most importantly, I would find peace in knowing that curiosity and the pursuit of understanding continue beyond my own existence.
And do you have any final advice before we end?
Stay curious, think independently, and never stop questioning. The pursuit of knowledge is endless, but the journey itself is what brings meaning. Focus on understanding rather than success, and always approach life with a sense of wonder and humility.
That's amazing. And I'd like to thank everyone here for watching the video. If you like this topic of content and would like to see more, please like, subscribe, and comment. And then that will tell me to make more. So thank you so much, and thank you for watching.